Well, thanks for coming. I hope this is a good event. We have pretty good turnout already, and I'm sure, I'm hopeful that as we go on the night, Casey gets going and Cindy Steigers, and we get a couple more people talking, we'll get a few more people. Please feel free to raise your hand. I do enough talking. I don't need to hear myself talk, so if you do have questions, comments, concerns as we go through this, raise your hand and we'll try and answer those the best we can. And as we go on through the evening, afternoon here, hit some of the high points of concussions and hopefully also answer some questions. My name's J.C. Wida. I am the athletic trainer, certified athletic trainer at the University of Montana. And concussions are an important thing to me. I do a lot of research on concussions. And I think that tonight's seminar came out of a group of us, but I think that you'll hopefully learn something tonight. My qualifications, I have a master's degree. I've been working for almost 17 years now at the university with football, tennis, and golf mainly, but obviously we have all sports there. And as we'll go through the night tonight, you'll see that concussions can occur in any sports, and some of the most rough hits probably occur on the playground at the middle school or the elementary school just as much as they do at a Grizz game or any of those other places. I do want to make it clear I'm not a physician, I'm not a neurologist. We do have some of those people here tonight and can help answer questions. I'm not a physical therapist and I'm not a trainer. I'm not the person who helps make sure that your aerobic classes and your lifting stuff are going okay. I'm an athletic trainer. I'm also not a Grizz, which you can not a Bobcat, as you can tell by this picture that's up here. And so I do want to make it clear, I'm an athletic trainer, and I do spend a lot of time looking at this stuff, and I do think in some cases that I know just as much, if not more, than some of these people. And so I will be talking to you about some of those things, and so hopefully you will get some of that out of this tonight as well. The obligatory disclosures, I didn't get anything from this tonight. I did spend a lot of time. I had a group of people help me, some of the students, thank you. Obviously the vendors in the back, Mike Cole, some of you guys helping me out. I am a parent. I am concerned about the health and safety of athletes, obviously, and I believe that participation in youth sports is supposed to be fun. We're talking about high schoolers, we're talking about middle schoolers, youth sports, all those things that this time, sports is important learning time. It's not meant to be a time when you have to change the way your life is then lived from that point forward because of an injury. And I think that's some of the danger area that we're getting in when it comes to concussions. So I did see a few people that I know, but let's just real quick, some coaches. If you just raise your hand, I kind of want to know my area here. I know there's administrators here. Obviously, any school nurses end up getting to come? Good. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. I know, like I said, physicians. I think that some of the parents and athletes, I don't know if they're here yet. I think they'll be coming a little bit later, but good. Thanks for coming. So a little bit of history of how this got going and where we're at. Over the last couple years, because I have been working in the Missoula area for so long, I started receiving more and more phone calls. Some of my former athletes, or some of the players that played at the University of Montana are now coaches, people that I've worked with, talked to like this before. And so, like I said, the last couple years I started getting more and more phone calls. My kids are getting to the right age now where I started getting involved with more parent groups. And so I started getting phone calls from that. And I realized as I was starting to help them deal with concussions and their injuries of their athletes, that it was difficult. It was difficult for a person in a coaching position, in an administrative position, a physician even, to help these kids out because the plans seem a little sporadic. And so I started visiting with some of my friends here, and we said, let's get together and see if we can do something. And it did take us a little bit of time, and we started meeting outside of our regular jobs, so to speak, to put something together that we could help give to Missoula County Public Schools to use to help them when dealing with these people that are hurt, and specifically with concussions. And so that's how it all came about. And the problem becomes this. Coach, I think there was a coach right over here. If that was your athlete, what would you do next? Coach right here, right? Give me an idea. Call Danielle. Good. Good first step. Good first step. All right? School nurse. This happened on the playground. What would you do next? Immobilize it. Probably call for some help too, right? Yeah. Okay? And I hate to say it's easy, but it's easy to know what to do with this in some respects, right? The first thing you do is call for help. You get somebody else to come get you, and you know what's going on, right? Because you're not, you know that this isn't a good issue. You sure the heck don't say, get up. Come on, let's go. What's the matter with you? You're not very tough, right? You don't say that to this guy. How about these two kids? And that's what we see starting to happen. Okay? This kid's getting helped up. He shouldn't be being helped up. He looks like a rag doll, right? This kid's dad, maybe he's consoling him because he made a bad play or didn't want to go out, or I don't know. But he's also kind of rubbing his head and starting to say, maybe I have a headache. Well, needless to say, that kid probably shouldn't go in no matter what's going on. He doesn't look like he's ready to play football anymore, right? So that's the next part of the situation that sometimes gets missed. There's a little disconnect right there because it doesn't look quite as ugly as the picture that was there before, right? So what is a concussion? Now, this is the only time where I'm going to try and teach you a little bit of physiology and about this neurometabolic cascade, okay? And trust me, I did it early while you guys were all kind of fresh, and we're going to get through this little point here. And I don't know if the pointer will come up on this. So, oh yeah, there we go. And I'm going to talk this way for just a minute here so I can see what I'm doing. But this is the time of injury right here. This is the first few minutes, right along the bottom here. Okay, that goes to about here. Now this is the hours and then into days, okay, along the bottom. The control is the influx of these different metabolites, I guess is the best way to say it, okay? The metabolites we're talking about most importantly here, potassium, calcium, a little bit of glutamate, okay? Those first three we'll talk about real quick. So what happens is when somebody gets knocked in the head, creates that movement that we talk about, there's an influx of glutamate. And what happens on those neurons, that glutamate creates impulses, I guess is the best way to say it, where there's an influx of of potassium, the K plus there. Okay? So I don't know how many people took anatomy, physiology, neuron, but basically if you think of one neuron end, getting ready to get to another neuron so that train can keep moving down the track, well, the potassium keep trying to move down the track, and this big influx of calcium kind of blocking it. There's too much of them. Okay? And that glutamate is making that do that. So what happens when that goes on, the calcium's trying to work really hard to pick up all those extra potassiums. Well, then you start your ATP, your energy, glycolysis, right? And you remember a little bit about that from physiology. And basically what happens is you get this glycemic, I guess I'm trying to think the right word here. I'm going to write, I wrote it down because I always forget these, but this glucose metabolism. So basically you get in the energy crisis. You have a crisis of that energy. Okay? Kind of like somebody back there starting to fall asleep. No. Anyways, at the same time, the problem is for us, if we get a little bit of that crisis, we can do something about it, take a walk, or maybe take a shot of caffeine or something like that. Well, in this case, not only is that the problem, but there's also the blood flow to the brain, which is along the bottom there, because of the injury, is less. Okay? And you'll notice how long it takes. This is day 4 for calcium rebalance, and then you're looking almost to day 10 before the normal blood flow back into the brain. Okay? Now, obviously this came from a study. Giza spends a lot more time hitting rats on top of the head and seeing how they respond. And so that's how some of this information came from. And it's a good article if you're really into that neurometabolic cascade. Okay? Now, I want to try and play this, and I might have to click back out of it and click back in here because we're having a little bit of second.
Hi, my name is Dr. Mickey Collins. I'm director of the UPMC Sports Medicine Concussion Program. Here at UPMC, we have the largest concussion program in the country, focusing on the treatment, the management, and the return to play of athletes following this injury. Currently here at UPMC, we have over 10,000 patient visits a year to our clinic, and we've also done extensive research in really understanding and better researching what the effects of this injury are. What causes a concussion is the head moves either in a rotational or an acceleration-deceleration way, and the brain will literally move inside the skull. When that occurs, there's a number of things that happen that produces a concussion. There's certain chemical changes that occur to the cells in our brain that, in short, leads to a period of vulnerability. During this period of vulnerability, there's two things that we have to be very careful of in managing concussion. Number one is you don't want to get hit in the head again. If you're still recovering from an initial concussion and you take a second blow, that's when far less force is going to cause far more serious outcomes. And something that could take a week or maybe a little longer, a little shorter to recover can sometimes be months, can sometimes be even longer, can sometimes even be catastrophic. The most important point is that when you have any signs or symptoms of concussion, and there can be 22 different symptoms of this injury, if you have symptoms of the injury, make sure you get out of play and make sure you're seen by a professional or a medical specialist that understands how to evaluate and treat this injury. If you manage this injury properly the first time, we can actually hit the reset button in the great majority of kids that we see. Concussion is not the boogeyman. This is a manageable event, and when you achieve full recovery, we put kids back to play and they're fine. It's when you're trying to recover from initial injury, if you try to push through that or get hit again repetitively, that's when we can have serious outcomes. And finally, it's very important that athletes undergo baseline or impact testing that allows us to have information.
That's fine from there. We'll go and be able to finish from that. Apologize that didn't come through like we wanted it to, but it happens. Okay, so a couple terms that I think that's important to remember and talk about as well. So a concussion or a head injury, MTBI stands for minor traumatic brain injury, is also a term that's sometimes used. And other terms that you start hearing or words that should make something go off in your brain is if you see the word ding or bell rung, or if a kid uses that word, I kind of got cobwebs. Okay, that should make you think for a minute, I need to take another look at this kid. All right, those are code words. And some people say, well, I didn't have a concussion, I just got a ding. All right, well, a ding in most cases is a concussion. If a person can't remember something and they are having a hard time with balance, okay, they may say, I just got dinged, but their brain's still going through that metabolic cascade. They're in a position to have problems. So we have to be aware of that. Now also, I put up there on the bottom the head and neck. Remember, anytime you're dealing with a head injury, you got to remember the neck. And now a lot of these, I know the person comes to the sideline or you're talking to them on the sideline already, they've moved. But the people that get knocked out, they're laying flat, you're not sure, right? So you have to remember that when you're dealing with them, that there's the potential there for a neck injury, and be aware of those things. Some of the signs and symptoms, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on specifics of signs and symptoms. I think those are easily accessible by you all through handouts. One of the tables in the back has a handout where you can get to the CDC website. You can get clipboards, you can get magnets, you can get posters that have symptoms on it to help you educate yourself, the parents, the athletes, of these signs and symptoms and how to be aware of it. So obviously those are available to you. The thing to remember is that period of time after the concussion that's called, what most people call that post-concussion syndrome, okay? These are the signs and symptoms for that. So a lot of time you get lightheadedness. You might have decreased concentration, hypersensitivity to stimuli, hard time in school. All those things are what you need to be able to pay attention and do good in school, right? You need to be able to have that stimuli. And so that's a lot of times what happens. A kid might get hit, might not tell somebody, and I understand that. You got to start figuring that stuff out then when you start seeing. Maybe he didn't do as well on a test that day, or she didn't want to go study or read a book like she normally does. Maybe you have a conversation to figure out why that thing occurred as a parent, okay? And the reason is because if you're in that post-concussion state and you get hit again, there is an event that can occur, second impact syndrome, that can create permanent disability of your brain and possibly death. And it may occur, and usually does occur, after what used to be called grade 1 concussion. So it doesn't take another major hit to do this, okay? They don't have loss of consciousness. They don't have a lot of those things. So it's just a period of time where they get hit again while their brain is already susceptible. The blood's already not getting there. We talked about the crisis that goes on. Okay? And the problem is, when this occurs, it's hard and almost to the state of impossibility to get those people coming back. So within a few minutes, the athlete collapses, their pupils rapidly dilate, and then they stop breathing. Okay? Centers for Disease Control, some statistics that I wanted to put out today and visit with you about, so it's not just idle talk, it's actually some backup numbers here. Estimated 1.7 million people sustain a TBI annually, 52,000 die. 1.365 million, nearly 80%, are treated and released from an emergency department. Okay? National concussion estimates, TBI is contributing factor to a third of all injury-related deaths. 75% of TBIs occur each year are concussions. Almost 500,000 emergency department visits, 500,000 for 0 to 14 years. So that's not the high school kids they're counting. Okay? Some epidemiology. This was some research done by Giesel, published in the Journal of Athletic Training. They have systems where they keep track of the injuries for both high school and the NCAA. 5.9% of all collegiate athletic injuries are concussions. 8.9% of all high school athletic injuries. Now, concussion rates were actually higher in college, but there's more injuries in general, so it makes the percentage less. Okay, but still, that shows you a little bit about where we're at there. Now, this is the one that's, I think, important for coaches to look at, especially coaches of the female athletes. So, obviously, if you go per 1,000 athlete exposures, the highest rates of concussion are in football, which makes sense, right? Okay, girls soccer is actually next versus boys soccer. So the same sport, 60% higher rate of concussions in females. Same sport, girls basketball, boys basketball, 300% higher. Okay? And I don't know if that's because of reporting, if it's where they're picking them up more, or if it is actually an occurrence, but it's at least that's something to be aware of. 16.8% of all concussed athletes had suffered a previous concussion in that same season or in a prior season. 20% of the concussions in boys and girls basketball were recurrent concussions. And I think, again, that's because, I mean, everybody knows basketball is a concussion sport, but you don't think of it as collision, so maybe there's a little bit of a misnomer there, that the person's not quite, well, they didn't get hit hard enough to get a concussion, okay? But if they have the symptoms, they did, okay? And girls do take longer than boys to recover. And there hasn't been a specific rationale yet. There are theories from strength, upper body strength, neck strength, to different metabolites, the way the body uptakes, their brain uptakes metabolites. Don't know, but truthfully it doesn't matter at this point. We just have to be cognizant of that and let them recover. Okay, now the reason I put this one in is because it's important to note that, like Dr. Collins said, concussions aren't the boogeyman. If you let somebody recover, 7 to 10 days, they're fine. And they, generally speaking, they go back to somewhat respectable normalcy. Kind of like Doc said, you can kind of hit the reset button. Okay? The problem comes is if somebody doesn't let this amount of time go and then they get hit again, then you're talking about the months of time to recover or the lack of recovery. Okay? So again, 7 to 10 days, 90 to 95% of the people recover. 7 to 10 days in a full season, you think, well, that's too long. Well, truthfully, that's not that long. 7 to 10 days. And then one of the comments I wanted to make from the consensus statement on concussions in sports is the grading scale is out. Okay, well, you can't say, well, he just had a minor concussion. He'll be back in a couple of days. All right, there is no grade 1, there is no grade 2, there's no grade 3. You just take care of a concussion, take 7 to 10 days, they recover, they return, and everything's good. Okay? There's a lot of research trying to figure out the longevity of issues, and the media is really hitting it hard now with Junior Seau death and the Duerson death and those kinds of things, but there has not been direct links yet, okay, for the multiple concussion thing. So what right now we're talking about is treat each one individually first and then make your decisions from there. Yeah, question?
So why did you get rid of it?
The rationale, a lot on the grading scales was, well, somebody has a minor concussion, they should still be being treated as what somebody used to be called a secondary concussion. They were trying to put symptoms to place people. Like, well, if somebody got knocked out, they're obviously grade 2. And they were actually seeing that some people were actually recovering faster after they got knocked out versus somebody who didn't. And maybe it was because those people were given longer time to recover before they had, those kinds of things. So instead of trying to categorize everything, and a lot of times the grade 3 concussions were the people, well, he had one grade 1 and one grade 2, and so that makes it be a grade 3 or something. They're trying to add it up, and it just worse, exactly. And it just is almost making it more confusing. And it's just easier to say, if this is a concussion, they have symptoms, they have problems, let's sit them down, give them time, do the slow protocol return to play, and then we'll get them back in ready to go. Thank you. Good question. So, preseason, essential. You must implement a medical plan specific to concussions. If you haven't talked about it, and you wait till your star quarterback has a concussion to talk about it, or the linebacker, or the striker, or whoever it is, point guard, then it's too late because everybody's emotions are already involved. And so that's hopefully what this protocol that we've worked on will allow everybody to do. Okay? Part of the protocol is that everyone must now have a baseline impact test. And we'll talk a little bit about impact. Understand the implications for cervical spine immobilization. Again, I always got to put that in because you're taught to. Missoula County Public Schools, this is kind of an introduction to a little bit to the protocol now. So all contact and collision athletes are required to take a baseline impact test. Okay? Whether it's at the school or through the Dylan Steigers or at Hellgate, whatever, it doesn't matter how it is, you just have to get that done ahead of time. All athletes will show at some point a video presentation. That video, if you already don't have that disc or your administrators don't have it, all you have to do is go to the CDC website, click on it, they'll send it to you free. There's a lot of stuff there that they'll send you for free. Now, you say, JC, why don't you get those for me? You could give them to tonight. Well, they don't let me have one. They won't let me have 500. But if I tell 500 people to go get them, they'll do that. Okay, does that make sense? Athletes in collision and contact sports are required to take a new baseline test every 2 years. So research is showing that with the change of the brain, they need to retest every 2 years. Okay? And it changes as they get older. At the college level, we do it in 4. And then at pros, a lot of times they do it based on the injury and the reactions that they're getting. Yeah.
Does that include athletes who have had a concussion? I mean, or should they have that baseline test sooner than every 2 years?
So question, should they get tested more if they've had a concussion, basically? And you use it as part of the follow-up afterwards. So your hope is that as they test, then they'll get back to a return to normal baseline, or at least a return to them for normal. And then if they, for whatever reason, end up having another concussion, you will have all those tests to use to compare against if you need to. So let's say the person's a freshman. They take the test as a freshman. As a sophomore, they have a concussion. They recover throughout the protocol. They take another test. It shows some sense of normalcy again. You feel comfortable as a healthcare provider that you've gone through the protocol and returned them to play. That would then become an add-on into the baseline. So they wouldn't necessarily take another one. Now, I do have heard of people who, in those cases, maybe wait another couple months and do another test in. But a lot of those places are the ones that have the test themselves at their school, so they're not paying to continue to test at another site. For example, that's what we do at the university. If I've had somebody that had a major issue during the season, I might wait till a month or two after spring ball and just test them again to give me a solid 1-2. But again, I'm not I'm not having that person pay extra for that in that case. And we'll talk more about impact in a little bit here too. Okay. So on field. Now the issue becomes when a person gets hit and it gets to the point where you think you need help making a decision, then you need to get help. And it's hard. I know I've coached some. I've been an official. I've been an athletic trainer. I understand them. When you're dealing with your practice time, you only get so many hours, and you feel like there's an issue there. But the issue is the kid. Okay, so if that kid's been hurt, he may or she may need to sit until somebody else can take a better look at him, or you need to take a couple minutes if you think the situation necessitates it, to take a couple minutes to look at it. Let the kid start the drill and take a minute to play, and then you go over and take a look or get help. Now, the high schools, they have athletic trainers, and you can call. I know they're not there all the time. They are, well, I shouldn't say it that way. They are there all the time, but they're not available to certain sports all the time. So you might need to call, or you might need to make sure the parent comes, and you might need to do something more for them. Okay, and that is outlined in the protocol how you can step through those. In the protocol, there's also some concussion cards, pocket-sized cards. There's some on the back table if you want to pick one up today, but they'll also be in the packet, the SCAT-2 or the impact cards, that gives you some ideas of some ways to test somebody so that you can get a better idea initially if that person is going downhill, maintaining, or doesn't have a problem at all. Again, the SCAT-2, like I said, I think I got ahead of myself there, but it will attest to the cognitive level, the somatic level, and effective signs and symptoms. It'll help all that stuff out for you, so that if you don't have it memorized or you forget something, that card's there to tell you how to progress. Okay? And this is what the SCAT-2 card looks like. The impact cards are at the impact table. They're a little different, but very similar kind of questions and tests to do. Okay, so game day. You don't want to leave the player totally unsupervised. You don't let them just go to the locker room and lay down. You don't want to do all that kind of stuff. If you do those kinds of things, you need somebody to be with them. Perform a neurological assessment. Again, that kind of goes on the SCAT-2 card. Determine the disposition for symptomatic versus non-symptomatic. Again, if you don't feel comfortable with these, then you need to get it to the next person in the line and then provide post-event instructions. Now, so here's the case scenario. If you're a freshman football coach and you're playing in Bozeman and you're a Missoula coach and something happens in Bozeman, well, they'll probably have some sort of help there at the football game. It's been some, commonplace to have that. But then you still got to get that kid home, right? In some cases. Or maybe you have to get him to the ER. Those are the kind of questions that are listed on that protocol that'll help some coaches through. Okay? Maybe it is you got to make a phone call. Maybe it is you got to find somebody else. If it is the athletic trainer that happens to be covering the game and they're at the other school, they can help. Maybe it means you got to call a parent. Whatever it is, but you got to provide some sort of care and then get them home, get them matched up, so you can't just leave them to their own care. Okay, a couple other research points. So catastrophic head injuries in high school and college football. National Center for Catastrophic Sports research data from 89 to 2002, there's basically 94 cases of catastrophic head injuries. 75 of them were subdural hematomas, 10 were subdural with diffuse brain swelling, and 5 did just diffuse brain swelling, and 4 aneurysms. Okay, 92 cases of the 94 were high school players. Okay, now 59% of those athletes had previous history of a concussion. 71 of those injuries occurred in the same season as that catastrophic injury. So they had a concussion that year, then had a catastrophic injury. So in all likelihood, they weren't fully recovered. 39% of the athletes at the time of the catastrophic injury were playing with residual symptoms. Okay, and then this one just came out. I just was finishing reading through what they put out from the University of North Carolina here. This year, 13 high school football players were left permanently disabled as a result of football-related brain injuries. That was the most ever recorded. Okay, 1984 to 2007, there was never in double digits. That number for a year was never in double digits. Now, for whatever reason, in 2008, 2009, there was 10 in each of those years, and then in 2010 there was 5, and then it jumped back up to 13. Okay, and I know what you're saying. In some respects, you think, well, a lot of kids play football in high school throughout the country. There's a lot of kids, I get that. But if your kid is one of those 13 this year, you're wishing that it was a little different. So that leads into the component that has to be done, and that's a youth player with a suspected or diagnosed concussion should not be allowed to return to play on that same day. You got to sit them out. You got to make sure that somebody takes a look at them to make sure that they did have a concussion. If they didn't, that's fine. They'll get to go back in the next day and we'll be going forward. But if they did, you need to start the process of the protocol. You need to ensure that the athlete is evaluated by the appropriate healthcare professional. Do not try to judge the severity of the injury yourself. Healthcare professionals have a number of different methods, so just a test. If you're unsure, sit them down, get somebody coming, the athletic trainer, whoever. You need to inform the parents about the things to be watching for. You need to allow the athlete to return to play only with the permission from the appropriate healthcare provider and after they follow the last sentence there, the return to play protocol, and have it written down. Okay, one of the things that we're working with in the protocol is the step-by-step process that can be signed off on each step so that there's no confusion. Did anybody read I think it's the lawsuit in Three Forks that's going on in high school? A young man had a concussion, saw a physician, was told that he could start the return to play protocol, and after a couple days, for whatever reason, he was on the sidelines in his gear and ended up in a drill and ended up getting another concussion and ended up having to miss a significant portion of his school year, and now is, in a position where he couldn't continue in sports. The lawsuit states that the coach told him to go back in, and the coach says the kid went back in on his own. So that's where the suit comes in. So the hope is to try and get rid of some of that in-betweens. I mean, the kid shouldn't be in his gear if he's not getting ready to be in contact anyways. That's pretty easy to spot as a coach, you would think. Those are kinds of things that are going to have a hard time deciphering, showing that they were correct. So the return to play guidelines continued. The age dependent, if they're younger, if you happen to work in the younger groups, maybe strikers, little grizz football, the little hockey stuff, it may take longer than 10 days. Those younger brains take longer. It's harder to make them sit still or relax or whatever words you want to use, shut down the stimuli. So sometimes it takes them longer to recover. Obviously, the guideline is symptom and symptom length dependent, and it also determines the athlete is asymptomatic at rest before any activity or school, and then the gradual increase of activity. And that's another component that it starts to involve the school nurses and the counselors there, is that sometimes a kid maybe can't go to school, or they can only go to half a day of school, or they have to start a slow, some sort of a slow, maybe it's subject-based implementation of school. Okay, so if you take a look at that handout, on the back side of the handout, one side talks about the definition of concussion, we already went. On the other side, kind of goes through the protocol and how it would be assessed day to day, or how you would proceed potentially day to day, step to step. I mean, obviously everybody would hope it's one day, it wouldn't take more than a day, but it might. So the top of that is important. Athlete will not return to play the same day of the injury. The athlete must meet all of the following criteria in order to begin the stepwise progression of the actual activity. So they must be asymptomatic at rest, without medication, which means ibuprofen, and with performance of everyday activities, including mental exertion at school. So you want to get them going to school first before they return to their sport. So you want that, then you want to go to the normal range of baseline on the post-concussion impact test, and then written clearance from the healthcare professional or specialist in order to start the next part of the protocol. So they're back in school, they have a good baseline. Now we can start seeing where they're going to be at movement-wise, exercise-wise. Okay? Once that initial step is met, we'll progress back to full activity following the stepwise process. Progression, again, remember, is individualized. Will be determined on a case-by-case basis. Again, this is all written on your thing. I don't want to just read here for you. So the steps right there. Now, a little bit controversial in the sense of 8 days, right? Well, that means they're going to miss a football game, probably. Right? A little controversial there. That's the situation that comes at hand. But 7 to 10 days to get to normal is the 90 to 95% range, 7 to 10 days. So this stepwise process gets you to that and through that 8-day. Most people don't play on an 8-day rotation. Now, that's not why it was set up. It's just the way it happens to fall. You can't practice contact being the first time in a game. That's just not right for a kid. Yeah. Go ahead. So you notice the step 3, the first 3 steps. So day 1 is the day they got hurt. Day 2 is physical and mental rest. Day 3 or step 3, if you want to talk about so if they can go to school that day, then that's good. If they can go to school that day, then they can take the impact test, see the physician, see what their score is, make sure everything's good. If that's okay, then the next step, day, whatever, hopefully 24-hour period, step 4, then they can do some light aerobic exercise. So the first, to try and make it more simple so that people can see it in days, that's why I put it that way, day step 1. If you want to think of step 1 as day 1, 2, and 3, you could do it that way too if you want to look at it in that sense. Okay, and a lot of handouts now and protocols, written stuff, are starting to show signing off each day by using some sort of sign. I think we're all right. We'll just keep going here. Where you have to go just light aerobic exercise, sport-specific training, non-contact. Then see the doc, talk about it, clear for a full contact practice, not a game. Then you're cleared to have a game. Well, that's a good question. In a lot of cases, it could be your athletic trainer. Okay? If you've had a discussion with a physician, and I don't know what some of the small school situations are, they might have to have had a discussion where they could go to a clinic, a therapy clinic, or they could go someplace and do those, at least the lighter aerobic exercise day, the sport-specific training, those kinds of things are done pretty individualized, obviously. Then the ones where they start to get involved with some drills, if you're talking football, maybe some what they call individual drills, route running, throwing passes, rollouts, those kinds of things, whatever it is, recovering people in a non-helmeted situation. Maybe it's a pre-practice or a post-practice thing, or within the practice itself if there was individual drills that day, so a coach could maybe monitor that one. In my case at the university, I do them all, but I know that's not always the case everywhere. Again, I wanted to hit home that each stage is meant to be 24 hours. Okay, so you can't ride the bike for 20 minutes, I'm okay. Now I'm going to go run routes, work out, lift, see if I'm okay. You're not going to do all those things in the same day and get all the way to step 4, 5, 6. And then medical clearance must be given before return to play. And that's the combination time. So again, if you see Dr. Schaefer or Dr. Amrine or one of the doctors and they say, okay, go through this protocol and then give me a call, that might be okay for them to work it out. They may say, go through the protocol and then come back and see me because yours was more severe than I want it to be. So I need to see you again. That could be the way it is, and then they can sign off on that. Again, it could. If the doctor and the athletic trainer have had a discussion and feel comfortable with the way the return to play protocol went, some doctors are willing to use that athletic trainer, yeah. Could be a nurse. If the doctor had talked to the nurse at the school and you guys went through the return to play protocol together, and then you made a phone call to the doc and said, Doc, this is what's going on with this person, are you okay with me letting them go? They might say, yeah, come ahead, And the other part of that is always insurance plays a role. Some people can't afford to go to the doctor multiple times. I get all that. So you can utilize the other people that you have in your school as healthcare professionals to help even some of that out. Okay, a couple more research things. 3-year prospective study, concussed high school and collegiate athletes. Concussed high school athletes had a memory dysfunction still at 7 days, whereas collegiate athletes were equal to controls at 3 days. Okay? This is the research article that I have people read when they talk to me about how come an NFL guy gets to go back sooner, or how come a college guy gets to go back sooner. Okay? I don't always think it's right that they go back sooner. I think there are issues involved, but this is the research that they're going back to. And I will tell you that in today's world, the NFL guys are being kept out just about as long now, and the college people as well. This was another study that was being done, 2,000 high school football players. They were actually looking at helmet design in this study, but part of it was testing and follow-up. Baseline serial computerized neurocognitive test, 25% of that 2,000 took up to 4 weeks to reach baseline. Now, these guys weren't having concussion symptoms. So that's where some of this long-term studies is starting to come in with long-term brain problems for athletes. So they didn't pick 2,000 people who had concussions. They picked 2,000 kids that were playing football, and they were looking at their helmets. And one of the things that they were trying to figure out was, is it helmet-based problems? And so that's 25% took up to 4 weeks to reach back to their baseline test. So let's talk about impact for a minute. Why impact? There are some other tests. Impact at this point seems to be the gold standard. It's the one that's, as far as research goes, is being used the most. It's the one that most major professional, a lot of colleges, many high schools are using. It's the one that's probably most well supported and therefore has the biggest database so that you can utilize some norms, some normative data as well. And so at this point anyways, impact seems to be the one to use for neurocognitive testing. It's a research-based software tool utilized to evaluate recovery after a concussion. That's a key term there, okay? And obviously, Dr. Collins, when we were trying to show, but listening to the video at the beginning, his group and himself were part of coming up with impact. And they do use it as a research tool. evaluate, or they take all the information that's put in, because it is web-based, and help make normative data, and then they do lots of research off that. So that's where they use it. But it's also evaluative in the sense of it helps them see where you're at. Now, does that mean if you pass your impact test on day 3 that you're ready to play football? And the answer to that is no. And that's where the confusion lies in this recovery process. Okay? Because just because your test score was normal, okay, when you were resting, when you were only going to school, what happens when you start running around? Do your symptoms come back? Okay? If your symptoms come back, that means your brain's still not working correctly. And so that's where the issues become, again, problematic. Some people have their athletes take impact the day they have a concussion, or within 24 hours, and then again at 3 or 4 days, and then again at a week, and then at 2 weeks. Okay? And they do that in a lot of times to see progression. They want to see that the person's getting better and doing the right things. And that's fine. There's nothing the matter with testing people more for that purpose. I just don't think it needs to be a have-to kind of a thing. Some people say that taking impact that quickly after you've had a concussion can actually prolong the concussion. It's like going and playing a video game after you got a concussion. It's not going to make your head feel good. Okay? And so that's why we put the protocol together the way it is right now. Again, kind of a repetitive slide in some senses, but the impact test is a tool to help clinicians determine and diagnose and manage a concussion. Okay? If somebody takes and passes impact, but yet they can't stand with their eyes closed and their feet together and their head back without falling over, okay, they're still recovering then from a concussion. Just because they passed the test doesn't automatically equal the other. Again, it's a factor, but not to determine return to play. All concussions should be managed on an individual basis. I went to an impact seminar one time, and they always talk about the case of a female athlete that they had. She took the test right after her concussion, and her score was obviously questionable. She was having some what would look like concussive symptoms. Her balance was fine. Her memory, otherwise, school-wise, was fine. She did have some social issues, you know, Facebook and some of those kinds of things. When she was trying to be active socially, she would get a headache still. So they kept her out a couple weeks. They tried the return to play protocol. She couldn't do it. She would get headaches, problems, so they took the baseline test. She actually did worse. So the doctor said, well, we'll give her a little more time because, you know, sometimes it takes more than 2 weeks. And so they did, well, come to find the next time she came in, she did worse again. They just talked to the athlete, and she didn't want to be in the sport anymore. So she knew if she quit taking the test, or if she didn't do well on the test, that they wouldn't let her go back to play, and she'd kind of have an out. Well, that would have been good discussion maybe if the doctor was in the room. The problem was the doctor always had the discussion with the parent in the room and all those kinds of things. So again, that's why it's just one of the tools. Okay, it's not a perfect thing to use. So is there anything that can prevent a concussion? Probably not. Okay? There are some things that may help the situation. Neck strength and overall body strength. Okay, makes some sense, right? If you can hold your head up, if you can prevent it from slapping back on the ground when you get your feet taken out from under you, or the neck strength, size, obviously full body strength, but specifically neck strength and size. Proper technique. I think that's where we're getting behind in a lot of our sports. We're not teaching kids proper technique. Shows like ESPN's Greatest Hits and the best plays or the funniest plays of the day, all those kinds of things aren't helping us out either, because a kid wants to be going full bore through the line of scrimmage and dive his head in there to make the big play. Okay? And that's not proper technique. The person's going to get a concussion. Obviously, skill matching, it's hard in some of the smaller schools, I know, but your freshman kids in August are basically glorified 8th graders. You can't put them against the seniors, the 18-year-old kids, and let them practice. Concussions happen. And the same thing can be said in some of those basketball leagues and those kinds of things. You got to be aware of those things. Helmets. Helmets aren't necessarily made to prevent concussions. They're meant to prevent skull fractures, head injuries, facial problems, all those kinds of things, right? You can get a concussion wearing a helmet correctly and doing all the things right. Now, there are some helmets that the research is going on and have found to be a little bit more protective, some little bit better foams, a little bit better designs, shapes, all those kinds of things can help percentage-wise with concussions, but they're not going to out and out say, ever find a helmet that they're going to wear that's going to prevent all concussions. It's just not going to happen. Okay? So, wearing a helmet that might be the best shape and the right foam in it and that fits right, you're going to have the best opportunity to not get one. But so you want to make sure of those things. Obviously, good reconditioned helmets. If you have a bad helmet that doesn't fit right with only 2 chin straps tightened because it looks cool to have them flapping around, you're increasing the chances of getting a concussion. I think the most important thing is when somebody gets a concussion, they take plenty of time to recover, then they'll be in a good spot. Okay? And finally, the education. We need to educate the kids, the parents, the coaches, that it's just not a toughness issue anymore. And I know I was an athlete and I had a concussion and I probably added to the problem by adjusting my helmet or wearing sunglasses when it was bright out and not letting people know. So the problem is we need to educate people, parents, doctors, kids, coaches, so that when we see some of those things happening, we can help the kid. Every athlete, when they get hit in the back of the head and you go up and say, "Are you okay?" what's their first response going to be? "Yeah, I'm fine." That's what they're going to say. So we have to dig into it a little bit more. All right, I'm not going to do this part because it was in there, if depending on the time. I do want to take a couple questions if we have them. We are into the vendor time. I appreciate the fact that we have some vendors that came. All of them have some sort of thumb or finger into a concussion kind of scenario. So if you would go back, walk through, we have some videos. There's some, like I said, some informational stuff out there. And we'll do that till about 5:30. Casey will get here and we'll go back at it again. Obviously, if you want to stay for him, I think there's going to be some good stuff said there. We're going to do some more kind of scenarios after that point in time. I also understand that it's probably really nice out and it's dinner time, so do what you're going to do. I appreciate you coming tonight. Is there any questions that I can maybe get at? Yeah.
One of the questions that I had is we talked a lot about going back to the sport, but when my daughter had a concussion, they really talked about school too, that the use of mental fatigue that they get, and they said that's just as bad as getting hit again. We tell our kids, because I'm kind of scared, like, you're doing homework. Now you don't have volleyball, you don't have skiing, you have all kinds of time to get your homework done.
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Chris. Good point to make. So, again, physical and mental rest. There's no other way to say it, and reintroduction of that can take time. Some subjects it can take. And the hard part is they're starting to do a little more research, but try and tell a middle school kid that they can't Facebook, text, watch TV, listen to music, do all those kind of things. It might create a brain injury for them to not do it, right? And if you totally take all that stuff away, are you creating to that anxiety and to that problem? And that's, some researchers are saying that it's not a direct line, definitive marker that total sit in a dark room with your sunglasses on and don't talk to anybody or move kind of a thing. So what you got to do is kind of pace the situation. And it may be, you know what, taking the iPod, the iPad, the computer, 2 or 3 hours, we're going to let you rest for a little bit. And when you get done, we'll call up Susie and see if she wants to come over and visit a little bit. Maybe she can Facebook from some people with you and talk about it so you don't have to, those kinds of things, and see if you can start that process. Same thing goes for school. Every case is going to be different, and so you have to say, okay, what's the subjects that are having a hard time if she goes back or your athlete goes back? Well, math, computer, those classes are going to be tougher. Obviously PE. So maybe they can go sit through a social studies class or some, I don't know, I'm not trying to be, one's tougher than the other, whatever. Everybody's different, so you just have to judge it. Maybe it's that they have to go to a class and then go to the office and lay down for a while. And it gets back to, what would you do? If the kid tears his ACL and he's on crutches, what do? You give him the key to the elevator. You ask them if they need a ride around. You do all those other things for them. You got to make some of those same accommodations for somebody with a brain injury. And it just gets overlooked because the person's not bleeding out their ears or something that anybody can see. They think they should be fine, and they're just not. But you have to go both sides. It's going to be hard to tell a teacher that, and then they're going to see the kid at volleyball game and everybody's yelling and screaming and the lights are on. So you just gotta be attentive to it and make sure that they say, okay, we're giving you some accommodations, but you have to do your part, and you need to go home and rest. You need to, when you are feeling better, work harder so that you can catch up and know that that's going to occur. And that's, I guess, the best information you can give at this point. Yeah, right here.
Is it possible to get people in the head hard enough to create a big dog and a black eye and not have concussion?
Well, I'd hate to say 100% of anything in healthcare, right? But I would say that it's probably not likely, but it's possible. But again, you have to test the situation. Is it possible to break your nose without getting a concussion? It's probably possible. So then you have to make those decisions. Is it as likely? I mean, in order to get a severe enough hit, you might, you're probably going to get some brain shaking going on. So you have to use the rest of the tests that you have to help make that decision.
Serial was my 5-year-old grandson accidentally hit his 3-year-old sister in the head in baseball. And it didn't knock her out, but they went to the emergency room and they did a CAT scan. The doctor said, yeah, she's going to have a lot of head and black eye, but she didn't have a concussion. But when they got home and called me, I asked if she could remember what happened that day. It was a little fuzzy, and it just seemed like there could be.
Yeah, and it's hard. There's not a lot of tests out there for 3-year-olds, so that's the other part of it, or 5-year-olds. So it is definitely part of it. But you're also hopefully not trying to get your 3-year-old back into another baseball bat fight with your. So, anyways, hopefully then you can maybe take a little bit more time to watch them, and that would be one. Obviously, you would take them to the ER to check for those big subdurals and the major brain bleeds, but that's probably the person, like you said, you're going to want to keep a little tighter look at them for at least a few days. Yeah, I'd be surprised if they didn't have a concussion. Yeah.
Can you talk about what the industry standard is or the state standard is as far as our athletic trainers in our schools, what their certification requirements are, and those people are? So parents can rely pretty heavily on them on the field.
Right. I can give you a short answer, and then you could probably get a long answer straight back behind you at that one with the TV. There's a board there about athletic training. They can probably talk to you more about it. Short answer, athletic trainers go to school for at least 4 years, college degree. They have to pass a national test, a certifying test, and then in most states they have to be licensed as a healthcare professional as well. A lot of athletic trainers also have to have a master's degree, but not all of them do. It is very the bachelor's degree is it can be a terminal degree as well. You can get and work as an athletic trainer with just a bachelor's degree as well. So that gives you a little bit of information. As far as state standards, there aren't standards in the sense of you have to have an athletic trainer in a school or available. There aren't any of those standards. Just like there's truthfully not a standards for a coach. There's not a state law that says a coach has to have even a CPR or a first aid card. Now, schools make those policies and allow those things to happen, but it's not a state rule. And it does lead me to the point that Montana does not have a law right now on concussions, on any of the care or follow-up or management, but I will tell you that they will have one at some point. And there are many facets of people, including the NFL, that feel like all states should have a concussion law of some sort. I think that's unfortunate myself. It's unfortunate that you have to have a law to say to take care of somebody correctly, but it is just the way it is. And there are at least 39 states now, there may be more now, but at least 39 states have a law that says things like you must educate coaches on concussion and concussion symptoms. You must remove somebody when they have concussion symptoms and they can't return to play until they've been seen by a healthcare professional trained in concussion management. And that people, those are just some of the things. There's obviously, like I said, 39 different laws, but those are some of the things that are in there. And truthfully, that was another reason why Dr. Apostle, Brian Fortman, Wally, Athletic Director Wally, they wanted some help getting ahead of the curve a little bit because they know that's going to be coming down the pike. All right. I'll still be up here for a couple minutes, be hanging out, and we'll try 5:30, so that looks like actually only 10 or 15 minutes. Thanks for coming. So we're going to get started. Casey is a Montanan. He went to Chester High School, correct? And was an all-conference, all-state player there, a couple different positions. He played tight end at Carroll College from 2000 to 2003. He was All-Frontier Conference 4 times. His senior year, he was MVP of the league and an All-American. He left Carroll College with 244 receptions, 2,698 yards, and 21 touchdowns. Did I short you there at all, you think? You got them all? He played 7 years for the Detroit Lions, 99 games, 677 yards, 5 TDs, 75 TDs, and 51 tackles. Lots of playing time. He's now a resident of Montana still, a returning resident of Montana, and we're very fortunate to have him come tell his story a little bit of life and times in the NFL and dealing with concussions. My understanding is that his career was cut short a little bit by concussions, and he's going to talk to us a little bit tonight. So Casey, thanks for coming over, and the floor is yours.
That play on the left is actually my last play that I ever played in football. As you can see, my helmet fell off. And then my head hit the turf, and then I got hit in the head, and so that was the last play. Good thing it ended on a catch, though, huh? But I was asked to come here, and I'm not going to talk much about football because I think it's pretty irrelevant at this point. I wanted to thank you guys for coming because this is a big step for parents, coaches, medical staff, trainers to come and get knowledge about concussions. I just read a stat the other day that 90% of what we know about concussions is what we've learned in the last 5 years. And so that's a big, big number. So it's a new new injury that we're not accustomed to dealing with. There's no longer getting your bell rung. It's pretty much a concussion now. I'm sure you guys have all gone over this, but what a concussion is. The brain's encased in your skull, surrounded by amniotic fluid, and what happens when you get hit, your brain bounces around, hits your skull, and the best way I can describe it is like a snow globe. You know, those things at Christmas time you shake up, and you just sit there and you watch it. And then when it all kind of settles, that's when you're probably settled and you can actually get your balance back, you get your speech, your memory and stuff back, and that's when you should come back and play football. But, you know, this is the second time I've ever been out to talk about concussions. I'm a pretty private person. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. What I've gone through, it took me 2 years to come out and try to help people because of the way this is being treated and the way that some people are talking about how concussion should be dealt with, such the NFL, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I kind of skip around here because my mind wanders a little bit. I suffered 6 or 7 documented concussions in the NFL out of 7 years. I suffered 2 concussions in 4 days. We played in Dallas on a Sunday, and of course it happened on a kickoff return. And I was on the wedge, and a guy came in, and his name's Eric Davis. And I don't know if anybody knows anything from Dallas Cowboy football, but Eric Davis is the same guy that got shot going down the interstate, so he's a little bit, lives on the edge of life. But anyway, he came down and just blew me up and rung my bell, concussed me. I played the rest of the game, don't remember it. Talked to a buddy of mine after the game on the telephone, and I was like, man, I really don't know what happened in that game. Came back on a Thursday, Thanksgiving, and we played Atlanta. And I came down, and the guy just barely hit me, and I went to the ground. Well, my whole right side of my face went numb, and I couldn't see anything. And that was the first time I ever missed a game due to a concussion. And they all just said, hey, you're not going to play for the rest of the year. And I said, I'm going to play next week. I just need you to sign off on me. And she looked at me like I was an idiot. And I was like, being kind of chauvinist, I asked to see a different neurologist because I didn't want a woman, and no offense to any women in here, I didn't want her to tell me how I can make my living. And it was probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done, because 2 weeks later I was back playing, and I think I suffered one more concussion before the end of the year. Documented, but still played. The thing about concussions in Montana and why it needs to be brought up is because there's kids that are losing their lives over this. I know there's a kid from Missoula that passed away due to a concussion. And it's one of the reasons why I want to get involved in this stuff. But there's no trainers in these small schools. There's nobody that can tell you, hey, this kid's concussed. He needs to sit out. I know in Chester, the football coach made a decision whether you played or not. Whether you were bell rung, concussed, whatever. He decided if you were tough enough to play. And it's not his fault. There's just there's no funding in these smaller schools to put a trainer out on the field. The thing that I think that they should do is a lot of these places have local hospital nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistants. Train them, make them go to a school, something like this, and learn about concussions, and then they can make the call. But then you have to have your school board, you have to have your coaches, and you have to have your parents side with this guy or gal that makes a decision whether the kid plays or not. And I think that we eliminate a lot of problems. One concussion, is it bad? Yeah. Can it be? Yeah. But it's not the end of the world. There's actually, the chances of you getting one later on is probably 4 to 6% or 4 to 6 times higher if you don't take the right precautionary steps and step back and get off the field and take some time off. I think, I'm throwing numbers out here, but a kid that suffered a concussion that lasted longer than a month is less than 1%. His first concussion or her concussion is less than a month. So you're talking like a lot of big numbers. High school football players, I don't even know how many there are. But out of high school football players, there's 70,000 concussions a year. So, and that's just documented. The side effects of concussions. I still am suffering, and I've been out since 2009. Memory loss, as far as cognitive, my memory is pretty much shot. I can remember stuff back to when I was playing in high school and college. I can still remember short-term stuff right now, but stuff like my wedding, birthdays, going out with people, like important stuff, I have a tough time recalling. And that's a tough thing to swallow, but it's because I didn't have a chance to come do something like this and didn't have a chance for a doctor to tell me, hey, Casey, the hell are you doing? This is your 4th concussion in 4 years. Out of those 6 concussions, I think I lost consciousness 3 times. So it wasn't like I was just getting dinged around, and I could actually hide them pretty damn good until my last, few where I couldn't get away with them anymore. I didn't even know who I was. But and then you're just mentally foggy. I have a tough time processing stuff. I can think clearly, tell you stuff, and then my train of thought will just go to left field, and I won't know, what my thought is. I'm not saying this to you guys for you to feel sorry for me, because I chose to play this game of football. I want this so that you guys can educate the people that suffer concussions, and if it's your kid, your grandkid, your team, this stuff needs to be taken real serious. This needs to be taken like an ACL injury. You need to rehab a kid. Even though you can't see anything and nothing will show up on an MRI or a CT scan, you need to treat them just like it's an ACL injury. This is a big, big deal. And, you know, I would never wish upon anybody what you know we have to go through every day. The headaches, the dizziness, the lack of balance, the temper. I thought I had a bad temper when I was a kid. Well, then I bought 80 cows and now I'm back at it. But my temper is one thing that I've have to truly work on. And my wife and I, we own a ranch outside of Helena. And so I've got land that I can just go do whatever the hell I want when I'm mad and break whatever I want. Usually it costs me a little bit of money, but I can do what I want. It's my way of releasing it. But these are the type of stuff that are telltale signs for you to see. Then sleep. The sleep symptoms, you know, I sleep maybe 5 hours a day. I'll wake up at 5 in the morning, be wide awake and can't go back to sleep. And I was always an early riser, so it's hard to really tell how much sleep I'm really losing. But, you know, I go to bed about 11, 12 o'clock at night, but I'm up, and when I'm up for the rest of the day. I should have bought stock in Tylenol because of my headaches and stuff, and I'm not a prescription drug guy because of people that I know of that have gotten addicted to them, so I pushed myself away from that, and the only way for me to deal with that now is through Tylenol, and it's horrible for you, but it's the only thing that works. Let me give you a couple more stats. Just high school football players, 47% of them say they've at least suffered one concussion or had the symptoms of concussions. So that's just sitting up there, line up your football team, cut it in half, and expect, whether they do or not, because numbers are numbers, but half of those kids are going to, at some point, suffer a head injury. And then 35% of those people say that they suffer multiple concussions. I was asked, hey, have you ever had a concussion in high school and college? I can say I didn't in college because we had trainers, and we had a pretty good staff at Carroll, and they took care of us, and you know, I never ever missed a game for it. And I can honestly tell you that I don't think I did in high school. I only played a year, so you know, I don't think I did either. But in the NFL, I don't think there's a guy on a roster that's probably suffered more than 3 concussions. Javad Best, who plays for the Lions now, he suffered 2. He suffered one at University of California, and it was a pretty serious concussion. Then he suffered 2, one his rookie year and then one last year that laid him up on the shelf. So, you know, and they're talking about his career being over. And, you know, I'm just glad that all this stuff has finally come to the front as far as, you know, in the NFL. Let's see, 50% of them out of those high school football players don't report it. In 2008, 2 players died from concussions in high school football. 20% of high school football players will get one. They'll get another one after, they'll get one concussion in the 4 years that they play high school football. ACLs, shoulder injuries, I don't even think they're even on the same chart as these. You know, so this is a pretty serious deal. After one, like I said earlier, you're 4 to 6 times more likely to get it. And recovery times vary. It's just like any other injury. People vary as far as how they recover, how fast they recover. And you know, like I was telling you earlier, I hid my concussions as good as I could. I just put my head down, tell them to get the hell away from me, let me play football, I'll worry about it later. And it worked for a while, and then until you want to go crawl underneath a bench and go to sleep, and then you don't know how to get home. You get lost going to your house with your wife, and she thinks you're crazy and lost your mind because you don't know where you're going. I want to kind of go about the NFL. And this is kind of a hot topic, and I do not respect anything that Roger Goodell says out of his mouth. I do not respect anything that the NFL has put forth as far as finding guys. Do they need to find them? Yes. what are they doing with that money? They're rolling it back into their own stuff. I don't know where the money's going. It's not, nobody's ever asked the question, I don't think. But they haven't done anything to help out guys that suffer from concussions and multiple concussions. Prime example, one of the best linebackers to ever play the game of football last week. Was it a brain injury deal? We don't know. I mean, time will tell. The safety for the Chicago Bears shot himself in the chest. This is just, Junior Seau didn't shoot himself in the chest just to shoot himself. He shot himself in the chest so that this can go to Boston University. I mean, they haven't done anything. They haven't tried to reach out. They haven't reached out to me. Go ahead. No, I'm not. I won't do I won't put my name in a group of people. And to me, it's not about the money. It's about stuff like this. They put out these smoke screens on ESPN and NFL Network and tell everybody how they're doing this to make concussions better and how they're finding people and stuff. Yeah, finding a guy that makes $5 million a year, finding him $20,000 like slapping a kid on his butt. You know, yeah, it hurts a little bit, but I'm moving on. So what Goodell said, you know, in the lockout thing and how he's going to take care of all the players and stuff like that, I think is a wash. No, you know what it's going to take? It's going to take someone having to probably die on a football field, as sad as it is to say. And if the one thing that I will say that Goodell did right is scooting the kickers up. The kickoffs and kickoff returns are high impact collisions. And when we were playing, we had a lot of kickoff returns. And so there was a lot of high impact plays. And unfortunately, they say, the kid from Montana that weighs 245 pounds, go back there on the wedge and go run at that guy as fast as you can and try to kill him. Yeah, that's how I make this team, that's what I'm going to do. And then when you get done, run down on kickoff and go hit that wedge as an L4 or R4. But things need to be done, and there's got to be change. I just have a tough time listening to somebody because he's involved in a lot of this stuff, and they give money and stuff, but that's not taking care of the problem. Football is going to have concussions as long as there's football, but that's the risk you do play. But there's some things you can do. You can, fundamentals. You got to learn how to fundamentally play, and that's another thing. If any of you is there high school football coaches in here? Yeah, the first thing you got to work on to me is being fundamentally sound. You're gonna have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have any fundamentals, you're probably not gonna win a whole lot of games. And learning how to tackle, learning how to hit people properly, learn how to block properly. Like when you go to cut block somebody, not just throwing your head in there. There's certain ways to do stuff, and I don't think it gets taught enough. And NFL Network and ESPN have eliminated fundamental football because everybody wants to have the big hit, and everybody wants to try to, make the big talk at school, the big talk on ESPN, the big thing in the paper. But they've made a team sport almost turn a little bit individual. And that's pretty much all I've got. I'd rather take some questions that you guys have got, because I'm not a doctor. I'm a rancher that lives out in the middle of nowhere that sees this many people in a year.
Can I ask you, this is kind of short, do you have children?
I do. I have a little girl.
So, and what will you do with her?
As far as?
In terms of she's
Oh, I see. Yeah.
probably going to be natural.
Hey, my kids I'm going to stay as far away from my kids' functions. If they want to do whatever they want, if they want to go to school and don't even play sports, that's their decision. I think one of the things my folks did the best is my folks said, here's what you got. Now, do whatever you want with it. We'll guide you, but you got to do what you want with it. I can't tell you to go, hey, get up in the morning, go shoot hoops. I hated football growing up. Absolutely hated it. I didn't love football until I went to Carroll and got around a guy like Mike Van Diest and learned how to love football. Well, I was just force-fed down my throat. I'm just joking.
I guess being a former athlete, what do you think is the best way to get good athletes? Because like you said, when you talk to the neurologist and say you should be playing, you by another person. So I guess, what is the best way to get through to someone? Because I'm sure if an athlete watched this and they're like, oh, whatever, something happened to me, and they continue to perpetuate this situation, I guess. From your perspective, how can we get through to athletes who, you know, want to play through pain, want to play and have their kids then do the best that they can?
That's a good question, and there's probably a lot of ways to do it. You know, just off the top of my head, a coach in high school has got to turn pads out to players. And to have somebody come in, there's enough groups out there right now that talk about mental illness, traumatic brain injuries, and concussions to get in to come to your school. And make every high school coach have to have their guys sit through a seminar, whether they pay attention or not, that's their decision. And that's when they get their pads, is when that seminar is over. And that should be your first meeting the first night. And just let them know. It's like anything. I think if you brought a guy in here, anybody know Steve Gleason? Or know of him? It's just, if you guys get a chance, go YouTube Steve Gleason's story. It is the saddest thing I've ever seen, and I guarantee you it's going to come back to head concussions. Get a guy like Steve and put it up on a projector like this and let these kids see what happens. Steve suffers from ALS, and he was one of the best special teams players. Him and Steve Tasker, I thought, were a lot alike. He'd go down with his hair on fire, and he was just a big hit safety. He's a little guy. Probably had a lot of odds against him. But now he suffers from ALS. He has a tough time walking, talking, and he just had a little baby boy named River. And it's just a sad, sad story. And I think if you get that through to these kids, that this is what could possibly happen, they might start to learn and figure it out. It's tough to get through to any 15 through 18-year-old kid. It's really tough. And what happens when they don't listen, I mean, there's obviously consequences to everything, so. I think Steve is my age, 31. Actually, I think he might be 33.
I was going to add to that. In that corner where the TV is, there, we were giving out some handouts with some websites on it. And one was Preston Celebrities. One was Eric Lystad, that the Washington law, Lystad law is named after. And you can sit down, call that up on the internet, you know, with your kid or with a group of your team or whatever. And it talks about what happens when you make the decision to hide injuries, basically. And it's a good lesson to learn. I use it a lot in my classes with my prevention and care class that I teach to coaches and early athletic training. And I try and put that out. Anyways, so that website's on there. So you can grab that to help you remember that side.
Here, I'm 31 years old, and if I could pass a physical, I would still try to play football. So, I mean, that's just what I do. I love the game of football. As sad as it is to say, and the same thing could happen to me, but that's just the way I am. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Have you ever thought of coaching?
I did. I helped out at Carroll. I view my family life really, really important. And I would be cheating my daughter and my soon-to-be-born kid by coaching. And maybe down the road, if I'm still, you know, upright.
Hi, Casey. I got in just a little bit late, so you might have already talked about this, but talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned Junior Seau. One of the things that really come out that his family's talked about is the fact that he hid his injuries, especially his concussions, very effectively. From trainers, from staff, he would avoid training room.
I don't think he hit him effectively. I think the trainer said, Junior went up to him, and the trainer said, Junior, are you all right? He says, Trainer, get the hell away from me. I'll be just fine. Leave me alone. And the trainer didn't do his job or her job. That's the...
Talk about your experience with that and how that can relate to some of the people in the room that are trying to make a difference there and things that maybe were effective for you to listen to and hear and made you decide to tell people when you were hurt.
As an athletic trainer, you go to school to be taught how to diagnose stuff. You diagnose stuff. You don't really treat it. You treat ankle sprains, muscle tears, stuff like that. You go to school and you do all this work to do it. Now you just got to come to the plate and not back down. As far as when a kid says, "Hey, no, I'm going to be fine," you say, "You know what? You're not fine." You're around as an athletic trainer. You're around these kids just as much as a coach, really, because they all come into the training room to get their ankles taped or wrist tapes or shoulders looked at. They all come in for treatment. You're around a kid enough to know exactly what's right with the kid and what's wrong with the kid. And so you just got to stick to your guns. A trainer in Detroit, I could hide it all the time because I'd just be, for lack of a better word, an asshole. Just tell them to get away from me, stay away from me, don't come near me. After that hit, I think I threw my helmet as far as I could. I think I threw it further than any football I ever threw because I was just so upset because I knew it was the end. And finally, at the same time, though, they finally, said, "Casey, you're done." And I'm over there puking. I can't walk straight, don't know where I'm at, but yet I still want to play the game of football. So as a trainer, I think you really got to stick to your guns. And you went to school for a reason. And there wasn't a trainer out there that I didn't respect. You know what I mean? As a football player, and I could be speaking for a lot of football players, but we respect trainers because they truly are the ones that get us back on the field when we're hurt. And believe it or not, a lot of the time you're more of a babysitter to us because we come into your room with all of our problems and stuff and talk to you about it. And so you've got a pretty good rapport with the student athlete that just stick to your guns.
You said you didn't have any concussions when you were Carroll?
No.
And why is that?
I think my first one came against was a pretty vicious hit. It was a West Coast play, and I can actually still remember it. But I ran a seam route to a 3-receiver side up the middle, and a safety from the opposite side there in a cover 2 came and just killed me and knocked me out. And then I got into training camp. This is my rookie year. And I was in training camp, and I wasn't going to miss practice. I was a rookie free agent, and I didn't want to go home. And so I went back and practiced the next day and got dinged up again and got dinged up that whole year. I really actually played a lot with a concussion. And I got another one about 4 games into the season, and I never missed a game, though. I just would have to sit out Monday. Tuesday was our day off. Wednesday I'd be back at it. And that right there was the downhill. It just that snowball just got bigger and bigger and bigger until it was out of control. But had I taken the precautionary steps after that first hit, I wouldn't be up here talking to you. No.
Sorry, can I follow up?
Yeah.
What could anybody have said to you after that first?
You made the team.
Which is true. I mean, the comment goes, if it was Emmett Smith or somebody that's already on the roster, that person sits out 10 days and they don't recover, where Casey's situation isn't, because he knows if he goes in, there were probably 20 other guys there ready to take the reps the next day. And that's what's hard. But as an athletic trainer, which is what I do, I have to go to him and say, well, I understand you're in a lifetime situation now from those decisions that you made. And when I do it, my situation, I tell the kids, because I got to recruit your kids. My job is to be here when your kids are coming through, and you need to know as a parent that I'm taking care of your kid the right way. And now, it's tough. But the athletic trainer in Detroit, if he doesn't get people back in the right amount of time or in the right situation, he might not have a job. So, and the same thing goes for the coach. If the coach doesn't have players to play, then he doesn't have a job. So it's a hard cycle or a hard group of people to be in, and it does make the job hard. Thank you. Thanks.
Anybody else?
All right, just for the point of keeping things moving time-wise, Casey, thanks for hanging. The next person we're going to have talk for a minute is Cindy Steigers, and the Steigers family is going to come up. A lot of you may have heard the story of Dylan Steigers, and if not, you're going to learn a little bit about it tonight. And I'm going to let Cindy and her family take the mic from here. Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks, JC. I work with JC at the University of Montana. He's a great trainer. I'm here tonight with my husband Tom and my daughter Libby, and the Dylan Steigers Concussion Project was named in honor of our son and brother Dylan, who died of a traumatic brain injury while playing in a spring football scrimmage at Eastern Oregon University in La Grande, Oregon. Now I need to read it. Dylan was the love of our lives. He was charming, persuasive, handsome, and popular, especially with the girls. Danielle and Chelsea are smiling over there. They know exactly what I'm talking about. He had a reputation for being a very fierce and intimidating competitor and opponent on the field. He gave as good as he got. He would do anything for his coaches and his teammates. I know he suffered several concussions while he played sports in high school. The first one I'm aware of was while he was playing football freshman year. He took a hard hit. He became disoriented and confused. He walked to the sidelines and he sat down for a few minutes. But before long, he was back in the game. Knowing what I know now, that memory makes me shudder. On the second occasion, he blacked out briefly during football practice. He was required to see a neurologist who cleared him to return to play. He loved the game of football. He suffered another concussion when he was playing in a football game against Helena High. Do you remember that, Danielle? The trainer, Danielle, took his helmet away from him. I think she was afraid he was going to sneak back in the game. She knew he would. He was furious. But he eventually complied. Danielle did her job, and she did it very well. I know that there were other incidents of concussion looking back on it. I don't know how many, but I know there were several. Dylan's confidence on the field didn't transfer to the classroom. School was hard for him, and he was self-conscious and fearful that someone would think he was stupid. He often showed signs of depression and other symptoms. With my newfound knowledge of concussions, I can't help but wonder if he was showing signs of brain injury. Our lives were shattered 2 years ago. Tomorrow, on May 8th, 2010, when Dylan, who was playing in the safety position, stumbled off the field and collapsed towards the end of the game. He and I were flown to Boise, and his dad was driven by car. He was removed from life support the next day, and he died. The neurologist who cared for him explained that the injury appeared to be a blow and a twist, kind of what Casey had, only he survived. It caused a rupture in the main artery of his brain. She assured us it wasn't a second impact injury. A few months later, Jill Olson from Peak Performance Physical Therapy called me. She explained that she and her son Chell had been working on a nonprofit concussion project. It was going to provide baseline and post-concussion testing for athletes in the Missoula area. She gently and hesitantly asked me if we would allow them to name it the Dylan Steigers Concussion Project. She wanted to name it in honor of our son and brother. We didn't need to think about it. We almost immediately gave her our approval, and we're honored to have Dylan's name associated with this project. Our hearts are forever broken. But we're given a measure of comfort knowing that so many people are being helped by protecting, testing, and educating people about concussions. I'll take questions too, but I don't know what I could answer. Yeah.
Let your grandson play football?
We always supported Dylan in what he wanted to do. I don't think that I could keep somebody from that. I mean, you could lose your life every time you get in a car. You can lose your life crossing a street. You can lose your life every time you go swimming in Flathead Lake. You can't live your life that way. You have to live your life to the fullest.
I don't think that Dylan would have wanted us to keep him from playing football. I think he would have approved of the safety measures that we're now learning to take.
Yeah. He was as tough as Casey. Anybody else? Thank you.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. So, just because there's a couple new people in, I want to just state, reminder that this started out of situations like we heard these people talk about, and just feeling like people weren't getting all the information that they needed. And a lot of this goes back to education. I don't know how many times Casey said it, Cindy obviously saying it. Some of it just needs to be, maybe if you take a little time, that first time you get hit, we can hit the reset button and it won't happen again. And that's the hope. So I'm not going to go through this again because it looks like a lot of the same issues or people that are in here with the protocol. If you didn't get the handout, there are some handouts that talk about the protocol, and again, it'll be coming out over the summer. But I wanted to go through a couple scenarios, and I'm going to have some people come up that you guys can ask questions with that go work in the different settings. And Dr. Jarrett, I think, is going to help me, but if Dr. Amrine can come up, Dr. Schaefer, Lindsay, is Mike Cole? I don't know. You might want to grab a chair. I don't know how long it's going to, but anyways, we'll go with this. And I'm going to let Dr. Jarrett kind of be the master of ceremonies in some respects in this part. Here we go. I'll do that.
All right. So again, these are going to be some mimic scenarios. And I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here before we get started with this, because otherwise it might go without saying. I think that there's been some wonderfully great ideas in this community over the last couple of years. But for great ideas to be instigated takes a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm, okay? And certainly Peak Performance, Jill Olson and Shell and her staff, getting this off the ground as a topic of thought and attention was critical. Marvelous idea. This idea to have this become part of District 1 policy, I think, is a good idea. And to have this symposium to kick it off was a good idea. But it took a tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm to get us here today. So we need to do a round of applause for JC. I know he's put a tremendous amount of energy into this. So, scenario number one, a 14-year-old female soccer athlete falls and hits the back of her head. She has immediate balance problems and confusion. Are there any soccer coaches here? No soccer coaches. How many people that coach female athletes are here? Okay, a few hands. We saw some data regarding risks in female athletes, so we have an athletic trainer on the panel. This player, what should we do?
Well, what I would do is I would pull her for the rest of the day and continue to monitor, continue to assess, kind of just do my usual assessment. My soccer coaches are pretty good about it. They're pretty familiar with my process and know that any sign or symptom and they're out for the day. And then I have handouts that I give, notify parents, kind of make sure everybody's on the same page, email PE coaches. There's a lot of people to kind of keep in the communication loop, so kind of make sure you cross all those bases. And then all of my athletes follow up with me every day, as much as I'm sure they hate it, until they're good to go.
Thank you.
So this athlete's obviously 14 years old, so she might not have an athletic trainer to go to.
That's right. And just a side question there, just hypothetically, in good old Missoula, Montana, she's a superstar. And she bounces back pretty quick, athletic trainer, and all of a sudden it's not too much longer and she's showing you pretty great balance characteristics, and you know, you don't want to blow her chance to get an NCAA Division I soccer scholarship. So do you let down? Do you back down?
Absolutely not. No, and this is very difficult too, especially with the athletes that you do know well and the superstars that are out there and the coaches that are frustrated because this is their, their star and they need them out there, and then parents who are frustrated because yes, they see a scholarship in the future. And probably one of the hardest parts and the most frustrating part about this injury is, as Casey said, sticking to your guns as an athletic trainer and not backing down. Because the second you do that, it's over. So definitely, no, don't back down.
And JC points out something very important in a 14-year-old athlete, a 12-year-old athlete, okay? You guys are all here. Way to go. Thank you for coming. Because it might be a club soccer game. There is no athletic trainer there. The coach was not here. How many soccer coaches were here again? Oops, none, okay? I'm going to pick on that a little bit this afternoon. So one of you might be a parent of another child on a sideline, okay? Or somebody that at least has a little bit of insight into that, okay? You have to have the courage to step up and say, no such thing as a ding. This athlete should be done for the day. So 2 days later, she's in school and she comes to the school nurse's office and she has a headache.